start growing as a business owner, you start experiencing more things in your business that you probably didn't see before. And oftentimes I find where a lot of people are waiting until the problems happen before they actually have the tools in their arsenal. I like the way that sounds. The tools in your arsenal. Welcome to another episode of the Podcast Trapper. I'm your host, Anna Agogo, founder of Black Pod Collective, Black Pod Festival, and Adode Media, which is a full-service podcast production agency. Yep, I do a lot of things in the podcast space, and I'm super excited to be talking about contracts and legal teams. Yes, baby. If you listen to some of our last two episodes, you notice that I'm focusing a little bit more on the entrepreneurship side of podcasting right now and just kind of talking you through that journey. For those who are new here, my podcast is focused on me and my experiences as a podcast producer, community builder, as well as an experience curator. And with that in mind, I am focusing a lot more on protecting myself, protecting my team, protecting my assets, and understanding more money, more problems. When you start growing as a business owner, you start experiencing more things in your business that you probably didn't see before. And oftentimes I find where a lot of people are waiting until the problems happen before they actually have the tools in their arsenal. I like the way that sounds. The tools in your arsenal. Look at me using big words. I know it's not a big word. Y'all just let me have that. But with that in mind, I really want to just kind of talk through what are some of the key contracts you want to have? A lot of people within my audience, for those who are new here, are independent creators, are people within the podcast industry, are people who are looking how to pivot and grow and turn their passion for podcast into a business, and which is what I was able to do probably 2 years ago. But I've been in the podcast space now since 2019. So let's kind of talk through hey, here's some contracts you probably want to have in place. First and foremost, the contracts that I have in my business are around client work. So meaning the scope of work and understanding SOPs and those type of details. We come on as independent creators. We are a business who we sometimes work with larger corporations to help offset some of the work that they have. This is from graphic design all the way down to audio production, video production, and so much more. And sometimes as a small business owner, you can be a little hard pressed to understand if you're being taken advantage of, understanding what's the norm. And so I'm very big on making sure that you utilize a lawyer for some of those contracts. This is where your legal team or just having an organization who you can partner and work with. I, out the gate, had a lawyer kind of put together a set of contracts that are not only just for the team, so 95% of the team, if not 98% of the team, are contractors, meaning they're independent creators, independent contractors who work here. And with that in mind, it was very important for me to be able to protect myself. So with this, we talked about client contracts, which includes your statement of work, understanding what they're receiving from you, turnaround times, just the expectations of what that relationship should look like, all the way down to disparagement clauses and how you guys can decide to go your separate ways if that ever happens. The next contract that I want to talk about is your contract for your employees or contractors on your team. And so for me, most of my team are contractors right now. The reason for this is long, but let's just start off with the fact that most of the team are contractors. And with that in mind, your contract has to be very specific. What I mean by this is once you start offsetting and sending things off to contractors, whether they're physically here in your space with you or they are some person who works remotely or anything like that, you want to have contracts around understanding how it works for competition, understanding for example, people on my team cannot work for another media production company in the same capacity and how they work for me. This does not mean if they wanted to go produce a film tomorrow, they can't produce a film. I have no desire to go into the film industry, but they can't work for another podcast production agency in the same way that they work with me. This is in their contract. If they choose to do so, there's a clause in there where they need to inform me. I then get to decide if I want to keep this person on team. What does that look like? The same thing for our clients, understanding that they can't poach clients and what that looks like and all of those clauses that go around that. This is the same thing with clients. They have a piece of their contract that says that they can't poach my team members. So it's important to protect your business, but also to protect your clients as well as your team, because the grass isn't always greener on the other side. Another contract that I have for myself And my business is understanding relationships with vendors. Now, I do sometimes utilize vendors for third-party things. And whenever a vendor is coming into the studio, and this is not like staying on a one-off, like if somebody just comes in to fix something one time, that's not an instance to where I'm having them sign a contract. Of course, there's an agreement, but when it starts coming down to you're a reoccurring vendor that I utilize, we do have to kind of start putting some things in place. Now, the reason for this is I've worked with vendors in the past where I've gotten them like thousands of dollars because I've referred them or if they've met somebody else. I started putting in place where it's like, hey, if you make business off of my business, then we should either get a cut or I need to get something for free. And I know you're probably thinking to yourself, oh, no, look, I work really hard. So I think it's very important that we set ourselves up for success. And people don't always think the same way because I'm a person who, if you refer somebody to me and let's say you refer somebody to me and you initially paid me $10,000 and I've now made like $60,000, $80,000 from the one or two, three people you've sent to me. Trust and believe, I will forever work with you and help you out in all of those things. And I think it's important for us to build contracts in order to set ourselves in place. Now, there's also commercial property contracts. So as you know, I have a commercial lease. And this may not be the case for some people. You may not be in a space to where you're ready for a brick and mortar, which trust me, down in time, I will probably be discussing pros and cons to having a brick and mortar business versus an online business, which I actually need to write that down because the thought just came to me. But with that in mind, as a person who has a physical space, I have to be mindful of I have a lease, and along with this lease, I also have insurance and things that have to be covered, not covered, all of those elements. And so it's very important that whenever I'm thinking through those contracts and whoever I bring onto the team, I also have to update my insurance to make sure each person who works on the facility and on the premise is covered under my insurance. So these are things that I think sometimes we don't think about because it's like, oh, why would I need to put that in their contract? Yes, that needs to be in the contract that, yes, you are covered. I think sometimes, like, I've heard a little bit of things around, like, Walmart has insurance policies on each of their employees and so on and so forth. And I don't know the details around that, but I do know that there's insurance on anybody who works here at Adode Media because if they break their leg tomorrow, I need to make sure that I'm able to not only be covered myself, but I'm able to cover them. Meaning, if you break your leg and you can't work, you're going to expect either some compensation and so on and so forth. I want to make sure that those who work for me are covered in that capacity because sometimes Matthew's on ladders and everything else in between. Do not get any ideas. Don't you break your leg, Matthew, because I do not have the energy for that. But I'm just saying, I do have insurance so that this way, if that were to happen, I'm able to cover him in some capacity. And so I think when we sometimes think of contracts and the details around that, everybody gets super nervous about it. But we recently had somebody on team who thankfully isn't here before anymore. But at a previous place that they worked at, they literally sent out an email to all of their client lists when they were leaving. Now, they signed a contract which indicated that they shouldn't probably do that, but the contract probably wasn't ironclad. But along with that, this person knew that that other company could not afford to take them to court, whereas me, on the other hand, I can and I will. But here's the thing. This is why your contracts go very hand in hand with your legal team. Having a contract without actually having legal representation or a legal team to support and back that up, and when people start knowing that, it lets them feel emboldened enough to make those type of risky decisions and put your business at risk. Like this person thankfully doesn't work here anymore, but they told me boldly, like, oh, I knew that they couldn't afford to get a lawyer to do anything about it. Let's just say it wasn't too long after that before I was like, yeah, you're not going to work. But those are the things. When people know that you're not really about your business, they try you in a certain way. Whereas when they know that you have your contracts in place, your policies and procedures, your operating clause, your SOPs, as well as a legal team who's able to support you in these moments, I promise you, you'll have less of these problems. And so this now goes into why it's important to have a legal team who understands your business and not just any old lawyer, not LegalZoom. It's not just for contracts, but it's also for negotiations. It's also for making sure that you're operating in the most legal and efficient manner because you never want a situation to where you put yourself in a position to be sued. It's actually one of my biggest fears. So having a lawyer on retainer, this could be a monthly expense or it could just be that you pay a fee. I've worked with a few lawyers in the past where it's a $250 consultation fee so that way they can look over and talk through some things, $150 for them to prepare your contracts. Go about it that way than to just try to utilize and do it on your own. I definitely used to be a DIY, do it yourself. So that's DIY. Whew, that should not have been as hard as it just was. Person, but at the same token, as you start to elevate, as you start to like get to that next level, it's very important that you kind of start off at a base foundation. Now, for those who may not be able to afford it, I used to be there myself when I started this business back in, goodness, that was 2020. Had a meeting with a friend of mine who worked in the same capacity. She had been hitting like the $50,000 months with her income. She had an amazing team. And she was kind and generous enough to share all her contracts with me that she had a lawyer put together. And I was able to utilize those contracts for quite some time. Thanks so much, friend. Really appreciate you. I was able to utilize those contracts for quite some time before I was able to afford to hire a lawyer to kind of revitalize and look through our processes. Some of those things as freelancers, because I know there's some people who you're not at a point where you're able to have a team. And I will say I hired a team pretty quickly because of the fact that I'm very big on growing with others than trying to hoard money myself. So for a while, I worked part-time somewhere else. Like I worked at a hospital while also having a team. Now, granted, could I have supported myself without having the team? Probably so, but I'd much rather hire other people to focus on their area of expertise than to try to stretch myself out thin and not give the best quality. I know, kind of tangent moment, but I wanted to make sure I point that out. But no, I think it's important to, I think it's important to set yourself up from a base foundation. Like in any time that I look at my level of success, which you'll notice I find it uncomfortable saying that because I really don't feel like I'm successful yet. I have so many more things that I need to do, like hire Matthew full time so that way he could take care of the studio and I don't have to be here anymore. Don't worry, I'm putting in an atmosphere. I feel like if I keep saying it and he touches and agrees, the Lord gonna bless me, Jesus, I'm ready. But no, like for where I've gotten to right now, I really do feel like having that business background, working in corporate all those years, really helped me understand how to best set my business up, creating systems, processes, and workflows. And so with this in mind, I encourage more freelancers and more creatives and more people who have the ideas, because I'm blessed in that I can kind of switch between the two. Sometimes I can be rigid, but I have strong creative spirit and mindset and I can see the vision, but I also have a very strong business background. So it does allow for me to pivot between the two pretty effortlessly. But I do recognize that some people who are very creative, who know how to do amazing things, may not have the best business acumen. And this is not saying you shouldn't go into business. I do think we need to start moving towards where more people are willing to build with somebody else. And I get it. You don't come with pitchforks or anything like that. I'm not telling you build with somebody else when it's like, oh, Anna, you're not doing that. But I think it's important for us to assess our weak points and assess, like, should you really be in business by yourself? Is this something that's really your calling? And I think a lot more people go into business alone because you're tired of working for somebody. And so I'm putting that to the side just as a caveat for you to think about, because as I talk about contracts, as I talk about having a legal team, as I talk about having an accountant, all of those things, if that feels overwhelming for you, scaling your business from just being a freelancer to being a certified thing that you can take vacations from, and don't worry, I will get there one day. It takes time and it takes a team and it takes systems and policies and procedures. So this episode was really to just kind of talk to you about what are the type of contracts that you need to have as an entrepreneur, as a small business owner, freelancer. And this also includes that legal team and the importance of not trying to figure it out on your own. It is very easy to fall into that trap of I can do it because I'm that person who thinks I can do anything. Like, trust me, I really do. But going to jail or messing with my money are not two things that I really play about. So sticking to understanding the legalities of things as well as like where my money goes, utmost of importance. So if you are needing support with just, understanding the legalities of things or finding contracts, I've put a link to a template shop that I love that's actually was kind of great to me when I was first starting out and understanding like what are the type of contracts I need to have in place. for independent creators. That place also has contracts for, co-host agreements, guest agreements, sponsors agreements. So it has quite a few things there. So I hope you guys found this information helpful. And just know, if you are interested in, learning more from me, please subscribe to the podcast, leave a review, as well as shoot an email to support@adodemedia.com. Don't forget that Adode is ADODE media.com to see, what I can share to help you along this podcasting journey. Until next time, guys, you guys have a good one.